The cargo bay smelled like oil and old metal. David Chen wiped sweat from his forehead as he moved another shipping container into place. Around him, dozens of alien species rushed back and forth, loading and unloading goods from ships that came from every corner of the galaxy. This was Meridian 7, one of the busiest trade stations in known space, and David had worked here for 3 years moving boxes. Nobody paid much attention to humans on Meridian 7. They were considered weak, small, and unremarkable. David had heard the whispers plenty of times. The insectoid Vrulians thought humans were soft. The massive Kelthians thought humans were fragile. Even the small trader species looked down on them. David never argued. He just did his job, stayed out of trouble, and sent money home to Earth every month. That afternoon, everything changed. David was securing a load of medical supplies when he heard laughter echoing through the bay. Not friendly laughter, the cruel kind. He looked up to see a group of Vrulians approaching him. Their leader was named Scrix, a tall insect with glittering green chitin and mandibles that clicked when he talked. Scrix ran one of the bigger trading operations on the station, and he loved making others feel small. "Human David," Scrix called out, his voice buzzing with amusement. "We have brought you a gift." David straightened up, suspicious. Vrulians did not give gifts without a reason. Behind Scrix, 2 other Vrulians pushed a large, reinforced container on a hover platform. The container was shaking. Something inside was slamming against the walls. Other workers started gathering around, sensing entertainment. "What is it?" David asked carefully. Scrix's mandibles spread wide in what passed for a smile among his kind. "A pet. Every human loves pets, yes? We acquired this creature from Draar 3. Very rare, very special. We thought, who better to care for such a magnificent beast than our hardworking human friend?" The crowd laughed. David knew immediately this was a setup. Nothing from Draar 3 was ever described as a pet. That world was restricted, dangerous, and home to creatures that scared even the toughest species in the galaxy. "I appreciate the thought," David said slowly, "but I do not think I can accept." "Too late," Scrix buzzed happily. "The gift certificate has already been filed with station administration. The creature is legally yours. Refuse it and you will be fined for improper disposal of registered fauna. Station Regulations, Section 47. David clenched his jaw. Scrix had trapped him neatly. The Vrulian gestured and his workers unlocked the container. The door swung open with a hiss of hydraulics. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a shape lunged forward, stopped short by a chain attached to the back of the container. The creature was a dragon. David had seen pictures, but never in person. She was small, maybe the size of a large dog, with deep blue scales that caught the light. Her wings were folded against her sides, one of them bent at an odd angle. Her golden eyes blazed with fear and fury. Dried blood marked her snout and claws. The crowd stepped back. Even Scrix retreated a few paces. Dragons were known across the galaxy as impossible to tame. They bonded with nothing, trusted no one, and attacked anything that came close. They were beautiful, intelligent, and absolutely deadly. The dragon snarled, a sound like grinding stone. She snapped her jaws at the nearest Vrulian, who stumbled backward into the crowd. More laughter erupted. Everyone was waiting to see what David would do. Would he run? Would he try to send the dragon back? Would he get hurt trying to handle her? David looked at the creature, really looked at her, past the snarling and the snapping. He saw how thin she was, ribs visible under her scales. He saw the damaged wing, probably broken when she was captured. He saw how she kept her back against the container wall, protecting herself from every angle. This was not a monster. This was a terrified animal that had been hurt, caged, and now given away like a joke. "What is her name?" David asked quietly. Scrix tilted his head, confused. "It does not have a name, it is a beast." David corrected, "and she needs a name." He walked toward the container slowly, hands visible and empty. The dragon tracked his movement, growling low in her throat. David stopped just outside her striking range and crouched down, making himself smaller and less threatening. "Hey there," he said softly. "Rough day, huh?" The dragon's growl intensified. Her tail lashed back and forth. David did not move closer. He just stayed there, crouched and calm. "I am going to call you Storm," he said, "because you look like you have been through one, and because your eyes are the color of thunderclouds." Someone in the crowd laughed. "The human is talking to it like it understands." David ignored them. He reached into his pocket slowly and pulled out his lunch, a protein bar he had been saving. He unwrapped it and broke off a piece, then tossed it gently towards Storm. It landed a few feet in front of her. Storm stared at the food, then at David, then back at the food. She did not move. "No pressure," David said. "It is there when you want it." He stood up and turned to Scrix. "I will take her, thank you for the gift." Scrix's mandibles clicked in surprise. "You accept just like that?" "Just like that?" The Vrulian laughed again, but it sounded uncertain now. "You will regret this, human. Dragons cannot be tamed. She will hurt you before the week is out." "Maybe," David said, "but she deserves better than being someone's punchline." He grabbed the hover platform controls and started pulling the container toward the exit. Storm watched him warily, still pressed against the back wall. The crowd parted to let him through, their laughter following him down the corridor. David did not care. He had seen fear before in animals and people both. Fear could be healed with time and patience. As he guided the container toward his small quarters in the station's lower levels, Storm's eyes never left him. Neither of them knew it yet, but everything had just changed. 2 weeks had passed since Storm arrived in David's life. His quarters were not meant for dragons. The small room barely fit his bed, a desk, and a tiny bathroom. Now it also held a reinforced container that took up half the floor space. David had to squeeze past it to reach anything. He sat cross-legged on the floor now, 6 feet from the open container door. Storm lay inside, watching him with those golden eyes. She had stopped growling at him after the 5th day. After the 8th day, she had started eating the food he left near the entrance. After 12 days, she had let him remove the chain that kept her anchored to the container's back wall. Progress came in inches. David had spent hours in the station archives, reading everything he could find about dragons. Most of it was warnings. Dragons attack without provocation. Dragons cannot form bonds. Dragons are driven by instinct and rage, but buried in the fear-mongering, David found a few useful facts. Dragons were empathic, able to sense emotions in others. They were highly intelligent, possibly smarter than most. Spacefaring species, and they had long memories, never forgetting kindness or cruelty. "I had a dog when I was young," David said quietly. He talked to Storm every evening, telling her about his life. "Her name was Lucy. She was afraid of everything when we found her. Loud noises, sudden movements, strangers. Someone had hurt her before we got her." Storm's ear fins twitched. She was listening, even if she pretended not to. "It took months before Lucy trusted us," David continued. "But eventually she did. She became the best friend I ever had." He smiled at the memory. "You remind me of her sometimes, that same look in your eyes, like you are deciding whether the world is safe or not." A knock at the door interrupted him. David stood and opened it to find his supervisor, a Kelthian named Rurk. The reptilian stood nearly 7 feet tall, with green scales and yellow eyes. "Chen," Rurk said, looking past him at Storm, "we need to talk." David stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind him. "What is wrong?" "Station security received complaints," Rurk said, his voice neutral. "Multiple residents report hearing sounds from your quarters, growling, scratching. One person claims to have seen scorch marks near your door." "Storm has not hurt anyone," David said quickly. "Not yet," Rurk agreed. "But regulations are clear. Dangerous fauna must be properly contained or removed. You have 30 days to find Storm a new home, or you will be terminated and she will be confiscated." David felt his stomach drop. 30 days is not enough time. "It is what I could negotiate," Rurk said. His voice softened slightly. "Look, Chen, I admire what you are trying to do, but that creature in there is a dragon. They do not bond, they do not domesticate. You are risking your life for nothing." "She is not nothing," David said firmly. Rourke sighed, 30 days, I am sorry. The Kelthian walked away, leaving David alone in the hallway. Through the door, he heard Storm moving around. He took a deep breath and went back inside. Storm had come out of the container. This was new. She stood in the middle of the room, her head tilted, looking at him. David froze. Hey, Storm, he said softly. The dragon took a step toward him, then another. David's heart hammered, but he stayed still. Storm crossed the distance between them until she was close enough to touch. She lowered her head and sniffed his hand. Her scales were warm under his fingertips when he finally dared to reach out, smooth and hard like polished stone. Storm made a sound, a low rumble that vibrated through her chest. Not a growl, something else. Are you purring? David asked, amazed. Storm's eyes half closed. She leaned into his touch, and David realized she had probably not been touched gently in a very long time. Maybe never. He spent the next hour carefully examining her damaged wing. The bones had started healing wrong, creating a joint that would not extend properly. David was not a veterinarian, but he had worked with machinery long enough to understand joints and leverage. He made a splint from spare parts and padded cloth, then carefully fitted it to Storm's wing. She tolerated it without complaint, trusting him completely in that moment. Over the next 2 weeks, their routine solidified. David would wake up and find Storm curled near his bed instead of in the container. He would share his breakfast with her, watching her eat with delicate precision despite her sharp teeth. Before work, he would talk to her, explaining where he was going and when he would return. When he came back, she would be waiting by the door. Her wing healed quickly once properly set. One evening, David watched as Storm stretched both wings fully for the first time. They were magnificent, spreading nearly 10 feet across. She flapped them experimentally, lifting slightly off the ground before settling back down. The room was too small for real flight, but she seemed content just to practice. Word spread through the station. The human with the dragon. Some people started coming by the cargo bay just to see David work, hoping to catch a glimpse of Storm when he brought her along in the harness he had made. She would sit calmly beside him while he worked, watching everything with intelligent eyes. The Vrulians were not amused. Scrix especially seemed angry that his prank had failed so thoroughly. He started spreading rumors. The human was using drugs to control the beast. The human had broken the dragon's spirit through cruelty. The human was lying about everything. David ignored it all. He had more important things to worry about. The 30-day deadline was approaching fast, and he had nowhere to send Storm. He could not bring himself to abandon her, but he also could not lose his job. Without income, he would be deported from the station, and Storm would be confiscated anyway. On day 28, Scrix appeared at David's workspace with a proposal and a crowd of onlookers. His mandibles clicked with anticipation. "Human David," Scrix announced loudly. "I have heard of your supposed success with the dragon. I do not believe it. I think you have fooled everyone with tricks and lies." David set down the container he was holding. "What do you want, Scrix?" "A demonstration," the Vrulian said. "Prove before witnesses that the dragon is truly bonded to you. Prove she obeys, trusts, and will protect you. If you succeed, I will personally petition station administration to let you keep her permanently." It was too good to be true, which meant it was a trap. But David was out of options and time. "When?" he asked. "Tomorrow, Cargo Bay 7, noon." "I will be there." Scrix's mandibles spread in that cruel smile again, and David knew something terrible was being planned. Cargo Bay 7 was packed with spectators. Word had spread fast about the demonstration, and aliens from every species on the station had come to watch. Some hoped to see David succeed. Most expected to see him fail spectacularly. Betting pools had been set up near the entrance, with odds heavily against the human. David stood in the center of the cleared space with Storm beside him. The dragon had grown noticeably in the past month. She was now the size of a small pony, her blue scales gleaming under the bay's harsh lights. Her wings were fully healed, folded neatly against her sides. She looked calm, but David could feel the tension in her body through their bond. Yes, Bond, he had stopped questioning it. They were connected somehow, able to sense each other's emotions and intentions. When Storm was anxious, David felt it as a tightness in his chest. When David was happy, Storm's scales seemed to brighten. It was not magic or technology, it was simply real. Scrix stood across from them with several other Vrulians and the station administrator, a elderly Pelthian named Counselor Ven. The counselor's silver fur was immaculate, and her expression was carefully neutral. The terms are simple, Scrix announced to the crowd. David Chen will demonstrate that the dragon is bonded and trained. 3 tests. First, obedience. Second, trust. Third, loyalty. If the dragon passes all 3, she may remain on the station permanently. And if she fails, David asked, then she will be transferred to my custody for proper containment and eventual sale, Scrix said smoothly. Dragons are valuable. She should not be wasted on someone who cannot handle her. David looked at Counselor Ven. Do you agree to these terms? The Pelthian nodded. If the creature proves safe and bonded as you claim, I will override the removal order. You have my word. Then let us begin, David said. The first test was straightforward. Scrix wanted Storm to perform basic commands. Sit, stay, come, stop. Simple things that any trained animal could do. David had worked on these with Storm for weeks, though he had never thought of it as training, more like communication. Storm, sit, David said calmly. Storm sat immediately, her tail curling around her feet. Stay. David walked 20 paces away. Storm remained perfectly still, her eyes tracking him but her body motionless. He could feel her desire to follow, but also her understanding that he wanted her to wait. After a long moment he called, come. Storm launched forward, covering the distance in seconds. She stopped right in front of him, and David scratched behind her ear fins. The crowd murmured, impressed despite themselves. Acceptable, Scrix said, sounding annoyed. Now the second test, trust. One of the Vrulians brought out a large piece of raw meat. David recognized it immediately as Calthian beast flesh, a common protein source on the station. Storm's nostrils flared. She had not eaten yet today, and David knew she was hungry. Place the food in front of the dragon, Scrix instructed. Then command her not to eat it. If she obeys, even while hungry, that will demonstrate trust. This was harder. Storm was still growing, and she needed to eat regularly. Asking her to ignore food went against every survival instinct she had. David took the meat and set it on the floor in front of Storm. Wait, he said gently. Storm stared at the meat. Her tail twitched. David could feel her hunger as clearly as his own. But he also felt something else, her desire to please him, her understanding that this was important. 1 minute passed, then 2. Storm's claws scraped against the floor, but she did not move toward the food. The crowd watched in absolute silence. After 5 minutes, Scrix waved his hand. Enough, she may eat. Go ahead, Storm, David said. The dragon fell on the meat with enthusiasm, tearing into it with her sharp teeth. David smiled. She had earned it. Impressive, Counselor Ven said. And the final test. Scrix's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of excitement in Vrulians. The loyalty test. The dragon must prove she will protect David against a real threat. What threat? David asked, suddenly wary. This one. A door at the far end of the bay opened. Something huge and dark padded through it. David's blood went cold. It was a Kravian hunter beast, one of the most dangerous predators in the known galaxy. 8 feet tall at the shoulder, covered in black fur and armored plates, with claws like knives and a maw full of teeth designed to crush bone. Are you insane? Counselor Ven shouted, standing up from her seat. Those creatures are banned on this station. I received special dispensation for this demonstration, Scrix said quickly. It is muzzled and restrained. See the control collar, perfectly safe. But David saw the truth in the Vrulian's eyes. This was the trap, and as he watched, Scrix's hand moved to a small device on his belt. The hunter beast's collar sparked and fell off. The crowd screamed and scattered. The The beast roared, a sound that shook the cargo bay's walls. It locked its eyes on the nearest prey, David. Storm moved first. She placed herself between David and the charging predator, spreading her wings wide to make herself look larger. The hunter beast barely slowed. It was 3 times her size and bred to kill. "Storm, run!" David shouted. She ignored him. The dragon met the beast's charge head-on, ducking under its snapping jaws and raking her claws across its shoulder. The beast howled and spun, trying to catch her with its massive paws. Storm was faster, darting and weaving, using her wings for quick directional changes. But speed would not be enough. The beast was too strong, too armored. One solid hit would kill her. David did not think. He just acted. He grabbed a cargo hook from the wall and ran toward the fight, screaming to draw the beast's attention. It worked. The hunter beast turned toward him, seeing easier prey. Storm hit it from the side, breathing fire for the first time David had ever seen. The flames were not huge, but they were hot enough to singe the beast's fur and make it recoil. She pressed the advantage, coordinating with David without words. When the beast focused on her, David would strike its legs with the cargo hook. When it turned on him, Storm would attack. From behind, they fought as one, human and dragon, until the hunter beast finally retreated, bleeding and burned. Station security arrived moments later, tranquilizing the creature and taking it away. They also arrested Scrix, whose sabotage had been caught on multiple security cameras. David collapsed, breathing hard. Storm limped over to him, a long scratch across her shoulder. He pulled her close, checking her injuries. Minor, she would heal. "I would say that demonstrates loyalty," Counselor Ven said dryly. She looked shaken but composed. "David Chen, your dragon may remain on the station indefinitely. I will personally ensure no one bothers you again." The crowd erupted in cheers. David barely heard them. He was too focused on Storm, making sure she was truly okay. Neither of them noticed the figure watching from the observation deck above. An elderly alien in flowing robes, with scales similar to Storm's but darker, almost black. He had traveled very far to find this particular dragon, and now he had found something even more unexpected. 3 months after the incident in Cargo Bay 7, David's life had transformed completely. He was no longer just a cargo handler. Counselor Ven had offered him a position as cultural liaison, helping other species understand and work with difficult creatures. Storm was his constant companion, now large enough that children could ride on her back if she allowed it, which she rarely did. The station had changed too. Other species began bringing their problematic animals to David, hoping he could help. He had successfully calmed an aggressive Pelthian sandcat, rehabilitated a traumatized Kelthian pack lizard, and even helped a Vrulian trader understand why his imported birds kept dying. Patience and observation, David learned, were universal skills. Storm had become something of a celebrity. People would stop to watch when David walked through the corridors with her. Some asked to take pictures. Others offered gifts of food, which Storm politely accepted. She had learned to be gentle around the smaller species, moving carefully to avoid accidentally hurting anyone with her tail or wings. David was teaching a class on animal behavior when the stranger arrived. The room was small, filled with a dozen aliens of various species, all taking notes as David explained stress signals in different creatures. Storm lay in the corner, occasionally lifting her head. When something interested her, the door opened without a knock. An elderly Dracorian entered, moving with the slow dignity of advanced age. His scales were deep purple and black, weathered by time. He wore robes of silver fabric that shimmered when he moved. His eyes, the same golden color as Storm's, locked onto the dragon immediately. Storm stood up, her entire body tense. She made a sound David had never heard before, a high-pitched chirp that sounded almost like a question. The Dracorian responded with a similar sound, and Storm's wings drooped. If David did not know better, he would say she looked ashamed. "Class dismissed," David said quickly, ushering his students out. They left reluctantly, curiosity written on every face. When the room was empty except for David, Storm, and the stranger, David asked, "Who are you?" My name is Talmer, the Dracorian said, his voice deep and resonant. I am an elder of Dracaroman III, and I have been searching for this dragon for 6 months. David felt Storm's anxiety spike through their bond. He moved closer to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. Why? Because she is royal blood, Talmer said simply. Her mother is Skyfir, the flame keeper of our world. When Storm was still an egg, she was stolen by poachers along with 3 of her siblings. I have been tracking them ever since. Storm is her name now, David said firmly. Talmer nodded. A good name, but it changes nothing. She must return home. She is home, David said, with me. The elder's expression softened slightly. I have been watching you both for 3 days now. I see the bond between you. It is real, which should be impossible. Dragons bond once in their lifetime, always with their own kind, never with other species. You have achieved something that has not happened in recorded history. Then why take her away? Because she has responsibilities, Talmer said. As daughter of the Flame Keeper, she is meant to guard our sacred grounds. Without her, our traditions are broken. Her mother grieves. Her people need her. Storm made a low sound, pressing against David's side. He could feel her conflict. Part of her wanted to know where she came from to meet her mother. But another part of her, the stronger part, refused to leave David. What if she does not want to go? David asked. Then I will respect her choice, Talmer said, surprising him. But I ask that you both come to Dracaroman III. First, let Storm see her home. Let her meet her mother. Let our council see this impossible bond with their own eyes. After that, if she still wishes to leave, I will not stop her. David looked at Storm. Through their bond, he felt her curiosity and fear in equal measure. This was her decision to make. What do you want, Storm? He asked quietly. The dragon looked between David and Talmer. Then she moved to the elder and gently touched her snout to his hand, a gesture of respect. She returned to David and did the same thing, but this time she also wrapped one wing around him protectively. Talmer smiled. She wishes to go, but not without you. Your people will not be happy to see a human on your world, David said. No, Talmer agreed. They will not. Dracaroman III has been closed to outsiders for 3,000 years. You would be the first in all that time. But you are bonded to royalty, which grants you certain protections. The council cannot harm you without Storm's permission, and she would never allow it. David thought about his job, his life on the station. Then he thought about Storm, about what she had done for him. She had trusted him when she had every reason not to. She had protected him when it meant risking her own life. How could he do any less for her? How long would we be gone? He asked. That depends on the council, Talmer said. Days, weeks, possibly longer. I need to request leave from my supervisor. Of course. 2 days later, David and Storm boarded Talmer's ship, a sleek vessel designed for long-range travel. Counselor Ven had granted David an indefinite leave of absence, making him promise to return safely. Several of his students had given Storm gifts for the journey, small tokens of affection that the dragon carefully stored in a bag David carried. The journey to Dracaroman III took a week. Talmer spent the time teaching David about dragon culture and history. He learned that dragons were once numerous, spread across dozens of worlds. But they were hunted for their scales, their fire glands, their bones. Species after species had tried to kill them or enslave them. Eventually, the survivors retreated to Dracaroman III and sealed it off from the galaxy. We chose isolation over extinction, Talmer explained. But isolation has made us weak in other ways. We have forgotten how to trust, how to adapt. Some of our young ones question whether hiding forever is truly living. What do you think? David asked. I think the galaxy is changing, Talmer said, and perhaps we must change with it. You and Storm may be the key to that change. On the 7th day, they emerged from FTL travel. Through the viewport, David saw Dracaroman III for the first time. It was beautiful and terrifying. Volcanic mountains pierced clouds of ash and steam. Rivers of lava glowed orange against dark stone, and everywhere dragons filled the sky. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, in every color imaginable. Storm pressed against the viewport, her eyes wide with wonder. She had never seen another dragon except in her own reflection. Talmer guided the ship down through the atmosphere. As they descended, David saw dragon cities carved into mountainsides, vast caves glowing with internal light, and structures that seemed to grow organically from the stone itself. The ship landed on a plateau near the largest mountain. The door opened and heat washed over them. David stepped out, Storm at his side. Dozens of dragons surrounded the landing pad, all watching them with unreadable expressions. Some were curious, others hostile. All of them were focused on the human who dared to set foot on their sacred world. Then the crowd parted. A massive dragon approached, easily twice Storm's current size, with scales that shimmered between gold and crimson. Her eyes were ancient and sad. Storm made that chirping sound again, hesitant and hopeful. The larger dragon responded, her voice breaking with emotion. She lowered her head and Storm pressed against her, years of separation ending in a single moment. David watched mother and daughter reunite, feeling Storm's joy and grief mixing together through their bond. He had brought her home. Now he just had to survive long enough to leave again. The council chamber was carved from volcanic glass, black and gleaming in the light of lava channels that ran along the walls. 17 dragons sat in a circle, each representing a different clan or territory on Draar 3. They ranged in color from pure white to deepest shadow, some small and elegant, others massive and scarred from age. David stood in the center with Storm beside him. Talmer had warned him this would be difficult, but the reality was worse than he had imagined. The dragons were not just skeptical, they were angry. "This is an abomination," hissed a dark green dragon named Scorch. "A royal daughter. Bonded to an outsider, to a human of all species, it spits upon our traditions." "The bond exists," SciFi said quietly from her position in the circle. "I have seen it myself. What Storm feels for David Chen is real." "Then break it," another dragon said, this one covered in silver scales. "Use the old rituals, sever the connection, return Storm to her proper place among our people." Storm growled, a sound that echoed off the chamber walls. David felt her anger and fear through their bond. She moved closer to him, making her choice clear to everyone watching. "The bond cannot be broken," Talmer said calmly. "At least not without destroying both parties. Dragons bond for life, you all know this." "Then let the human die," Scorch said bluntly. "The bond will end with his death, and Storm will be free to bond properly with one of her own kind." David's heart hammered, but he kept his expression neutral. Storm snarled, flames flickering between her teeth. "Enough," SciFi said, her voice carrying authority. "We will not murder a guest on our world. Even if he were not bonded to my daughter, such an act would dishonor us all." "Then what do you propose?" the silver dragon asked. "Let him take Storm back to the stars, allow our royal line to vanish into the galaxy." "I propose we test him," SciFi said. "If David Chen is truly worthy of my daughter's bond, let him prove it. 3 trials as our ancestors designed them. Courage, wisdom, and compassion. If he succeeds, we acknowledge the bond and let them leave together with our blessing." "And if he fails?" Scorch demanded. SciFi's eyes were sad. "Then Storm must choose between her bond and her people. No one else can make that choice for her." The council debated for hours. David was not allowed to speak, only to stand and listen as his fate was discussed. Finally, they reached a decision. The trials would begin the next day. That night, David sat with Storm on a ledge overlooking a lava river. SciFi joined them, moving quietly despite her size. "You do not have to do this," she said to David. "You could leave tonight. Talmer would take you back to the station." "And leave Storm here?" David shook his head. "No." "She would survive," SciFi said gently. "She would be unhappy, but she would live. Eventually, the bond would fade through distance and time. She could bond again properly." "Would you want that for her?" David asked. "To forget, to pretend this never happened." SciFi was quiet for a long moment. "No," she admitted. When I look at my daughter now, I see something I have never seen in any dragon before. She has grown beyond what she would have been if she had stayed here. Your influence has made her stronger, braver, more adaptable. These are qualities we dragons have lost over the centuries of hiding. Then why the trials? Because the council needs to see what I see, Skyfair said. They need to understand that you are not stealing Storm from us. You are giving her something we could not, freedom to choose her own path. The next morning, David faced the first trial, courage. He was brought to a massive cavern called the Crucible, a place where young dragons proved their worth. Inside waited Grimskill, the oldest living dragon on Draar 3, ancient and half-mad from centuries of isolation. Enter alone, Talmer instructed. Face Grimskill and earn his respect, that is all. Storm tried to follow, but other dragons held her back. David heard her desperate cries as he walked into the darkness alone. The crucible was searingly hot. Lava bubbled in pools throughout the cavern, casting everything in red and orange light. David's clothes were soaked with sweat within minutes. He pressed forward, following the sound of heavy breathing. Grimskill emerged from the shadows. He was enormous, easily the size of a small building, covered in silver scales that had dulled to gray with age. Scars crisscrossed his body. One eye was milky white and blind. He looked at David with his good eye and roared, a sound that knocked David to his knees. "You dare enter my domain, little creature." Grimskill's voice was like grinding stone. "You dare bond with royalty when you are nothing but meat and weakness." David stood up slowly, legs shaking. "I dare because Storm chose me, and I chose her." "Love makes you foolish," Grimskill said. "Love will get you killed." The ancient dragon attacked without warning, breathing fire that turned the air itself into flame. David dove behind a rock formation, feeling the heat sear his back. He could not fight this creature, could not outrun it, could only survive. But surviving was not enough. The trial was to earn respect. David stepped out from cover. Grimskill reared back for another blast of fire, but David raised his hands. "Wait," David called. "Please, I need you to understand." "Something." Grimskill paused, curious. "Understand what?" "That you are not a monster," David said carefully. "You are a guardian. You have stayed down here for centuries protecting your people, and no one remembers. No one thanks you. You are alone because you chose duty over everything else." The dragon's good eye widened. "How do you know this?" "Because I see it in you," David said. "The same thing I saw in Storm when we met. Loneliness. Fear hidden under anger. You are not testing my courage. You are testing whether I can see past the fire and claws to the person underneath." Grimskill lowered his head slowly. "No one has spoken to me like this in 500 years. "I am sorry for that," David said honestly. "No one should be alone that long." The ancient dragon was quiet. Then he laughed, a sound like breaking rocks. "You pass, human, not because you are brave. Any fool can be brave, but because you have compassion even for those who would kill you. That is rare. That is worth respecting." David returned from the crucible with Grimskill following him, shocking every dragon who saw them. The second trial, Wisdom, involved solving an ancient puzzle that had stumped scholars for generations. David solved it in 3 hours by approaching it not as a dragon would, but as a human, thinking laterally instead of linearly. The final trial was compassion, and it was the simplest but hardest. David had to make a choice: take Storm and leave immediately with the Council's blessing, or stay on Draar 3 for 1 year to teach dragons about the wider galaxy, risking that Storm might change her mind during that time. David chose to stay. 1 year on Draar 3 felt like both forever and no time at all. David lived in a cave system near Skyfair's territory, teaching anyone who would listen about the galaxy beyond their world. At first, only a few young dragons attended his lessons. Then more came. Then elders started sitting in the back, pretending they were just passing through but listening to every word. He taught them about technology and trade, about the thousands of species that filled the stars, about cultures and conflicts and cooperation. He showed them recordings from the station, images of different worlds, examples of how varied and complex the galaxy had become. But more importantly, he taught them about fear, how it could protect you but also how it could trap you, how the dragons had chosen safety over growth, and how that choice had slowly diminished them. "You are guardians," David told a class of 50 dragons one afternoon. "But what are you guarding? Memories, traditions, or are you guarding life itself? Because life means change, it means risk, it means sometimes getting hurt but choosing to stay open anyway." Storm sat beside him during every lesson, now fully grown. She was magnificent, larger than her mother, with scales that seemed to shift between blue and purple in the light. She had become a symbol to the younger dragons, proof that there were other ways to live. The council had softened over the year. Even Scorch had admitted that David's presence had sparked more debate and growth among dragons than had occurred in centuries. Grimskill had emerged from his crucible permanently, becoming David's unlikely friend and fiercest defender. On the final day of the year, the council gathered again. This time, David stood before them not as a prisoner, but as an equal. "David Chen," SciFi said formally, "you have completed your year among us. You have taught us much, perhaps more than you realize. The council has voted, and we have decided to open limited contact with the wider galaxy." Murmurs spread through the chamber. This was unprecedented. "We will send ambassadors," SciFi continued. "Young dragons who wish to see the stars, who will learn and report back. We will establish trade relationships, cultural exchanges, and defensive alliances. We will no longer hide from the galaxy." "That is a brave choice," David said. "It is a terrifying choice," Scorch corrected. "But you have shown us that isolation is its own form of death, better to risk pain than to fade away forgotten." "There is one more decision," SciFi said, looking at Storm. "My daughter must choose, stay here and take her place as heir to the Flame Keeper, or leave with you and become something new, something we have no name for." Storm stood. She had not spoken aloud during the entire year, communicating only through gestures and emotions. But now she took a breath and spoke in the dragon language, her voice clear and strong. Talmer translated quietly for David. "She says she chooses both. She will serve as ambassador, traveling between worlds, bonded to a human who understands both sides. She will be the bridge between dragons and the galaxy, and she asks that others be allowed to follow the same path if they find worthy bonds." The council debated fiercely. Some called it madness, others called it evolution. Finally, they agreed. Dragons could form bonds with other species, but only if the bond was real, mutual, and proven through trials. 3 young dragons immediately volunteered to leave with Storm and David, hoping to find their own bonds among the stars. 2 months later, David stood in Cargo Bay 7 again, exactly where everything had started. Storm was beside him, along with the 3 young dragons they had brought from Dracaroman 3. The bay was packed with species from across the station, all wanting to witness the return of the human and his dragon. Counselor Venn approached with official documents. "David Chen, on behalf of Meridian 7 and the Galactic Council, I am pleased to grant you the title of Special Ambassador for Dragon Relations. You and Storm will facilitate peaceful contact between Dracaroman 3 and other worlds." The crowd erupted in applause. David felt overwhelmed. A year ago, he had been a simple cargo handler. Now he was changing galactic history. Someone pushed through the crowd. David was shocked to see it was one of Scrix's former associates, a Vrulian named Tick. The insectoid approached nervously. "David Chen," Tick said, mandibles clicking with uncertainty. "I was there when Scrix gave you the dragon. I laughed at you. I thought you would fail. I wanted to say that I was wrong and to thank you." "Thank me?" David was confused. "Because of you and Storm, 3 different species have contacted my trading company asking for help with difficult creatures. Your methods work. You proved that patience and respect are not weakness. You proved that humans have value." Tick bowed in the Vrulian gesture of deep respect. "You made me question my prejudices. That is a gift." Over the next months, David and Storm traveled across the galaxy. They helped establish the first dragon embassy on a neutral world. They trained other species in bonding techniques. They rescued endangered creatures and found them homes. Storm grew legendary, and the story of how a prank became a galactic movement spread everywhere. Other dragons found bonds. A young golden dragon bonded with a Kelthian engineer. A white dragon bonded with a Pelthian poet. Each bond was different, unique, but all were real. The galaxy was changing, becoming more connected, less afraid. 5 years after that first day, in the cargo bay, David received a message. It was from Scrix, now released from prison and working as a rehabilitation specialist for rescued exotic animals. The message was simple. I gave you a dragon to humiliate you. Instead, you changed the galaxy. Thank you for showing me what strength really means. David showed the message to Storm, who rumbled with amusement. They were in their ship, heading toward a new world where reports said an intelligent species needed help understanding a dangerous native predator. Ready for another adventure? David asked. Storm's response came through their bond, warm and certain. Always, as long as we are together. They jumped to FTL, human and dragon, heading toward the next impossible thing they would make possible. Behind them, the galaxy continued its slow transformation, learning that the strongest bonds were built not on power or fear, but on simple compassion. And it had all started with a prank, a damaged dragon, and a human who refused to give up on either of them. The legend of David and Storm would be told for generations, but the real story was simpler. Sometimes the best things in life come from the worst intentions, and sometimes the greatest strength is just choosing to be kind when everyone expects you to be cruel.